Welcome to the Mission Possible podcast. I'm your host, Joseph VanFonda. I'm the CEO of the Disabled Veterans Nash Foundation. Here, we believe that all life challenges can be managed. And today, we're focusing on one of the biggest challenges many veterans and first responders face is PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress. I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Martin Rossman, an expert in mind, body, and spirit. Dr. Rossman is a pioneer in integrative medicine, blending the conventional practices and holistic healing of methods. His work emphasizes on the power of mind and managing stress, pain, and trauma. Through his decades of experiences, he has guided countless individuals to a place of healing, balance, and resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, and America, our guest today is Dr. Frank Bourke. He's a PhD, Executive Director of the Research and Recognition Project. Dr. Bourke's nonprofit is focused on developing groundbreaking evidence-based treatments for PTSD. His mission is to provide hope and healing to veterans, first responders, and family members, and others who have experienced trauma. Dr. Bourke, I want to welcome you to the podcast. We're honored to have you with us.
It's wonderful to be here, Joe.
All right. Now, we're going to start. I'm going to hand this over to my co-host, Dr. Martin Rossman. By the way,
Thanks,
good morning,
Joe.
gentlemen.
Good morning to you, Joe. Good morning, Dr. Bourke. I'm really excited to meet you, and having looked at your work with the Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories Protocol, which is seeming to really show results, positive results with people with PTSD, far, far greater than anything else I've ever seen in the field, up in the 90 percentile kind of thing. So that's extremely exciting because, as you know, and everybody knows, it's a very difficult thing to treat. And I see, or I glean from reading about you and your website, that this was precipitated by the tragedy of 9/11 and you putting together something for a firm that you were working with that I assume suffered many casualties, but I know that wasn't the beginning of it. So I wonder if you could tell us how your background brought you into developing this approach to PTSD. I know now you're teaching people in Ukraine and talking deeply to the DoD and the Department and the VA. But how did you get there? You must have been prepped for it in some way, or having worked with trauma.
Yeah, I spent initially I was trained as a research psychologist, Dr. Rossman, at the Institute of Psychiatry in London. So I was a young measurement geek as a kid, as a young professional. And I was intent on measuring psychotherapy in terms of finding stuff that really worked. And I got, how shall I say, unenthused with the scientific world and switched into clinical practice. I taught at Cornell, had a 20-year disparate, varied clinical history and practice, including teaching at Cornell and attempting to get myself as a master practitioner. I learned a lot of the neurolinguistic programming techniques. I thought they were wonderful. I worked with Milton Erickson, did the hypnosis stuff. Carl Rogers was my original teacher, so the high empathy stuff at the core. And I was carrying all of those when 9/11 happened. And the insurance companies asked me to go down. They didn't have enough therapists. I put together a team from upstate New York and wound up cornered by the Aon Corporation. They had 850 survivors from above the 100th floor, and they didn't have anyone to help them. So they arranged to jet me every week from upstate New York down to New York City, and I took responsibility for helping the 850 survivors. 250 of them turned out to have severe PTSD. And one of the protocols that I had picked up in the NLP world, VKD, I began to use almost immediately and adapted to the situation so that at the end of 11 months, I was getting remarkable results from the protocol. And like a lot of people who were down there those first few months in the dust and everything, I came up with a terminal diagnosis of cancer 6 months after I got back, 2012. So, you know, I'm a smart man. You get a terminal diagnosis of cancer, you die. A year and a half later, I'm looking in the mirror and say, what the hell are you going to do now? And with my background in research and knowing what it would take to get this thing, this protocol that I have put together in New York into acceptance nationally, I founded a nonprofit, and a bunch of guys like Uncle Joe there from the veterans community saw the efficacy in the thing and rallied around it. And they're pretty much the energy and the money. It's taken us 18 years, Dr. Rossman, to get this thing recognized as evidentiary medicine. And I'm sure you've looked at the studies. You probably didn't see the one that came out last month from Walter Reed.
I don't think I did.
Mike Roy, Dr. Mike Roy, is the head, one of the top PTSD researchers in the world. He just completed an RCT at Walter Reed. And the last statement in his conclusions is RTM should be made a first-line treatment for PTSD across the board. So we're going now for bureaucratic acceptance with the help of the Secretary of the Navy, so that it gets identified as a first-line therapy in the VA and with the DoD. That's kind of where we are. For me, you know, I hate being the poster boy. You know, and even the protocol itself, when we wanted to manualize it, because what I was using in New York was not able to be scientifically tested. So I got a group of 8 friends, experts in therapy and NLP, et cetera, together for about 6 months. And we reworked what I was doing in New York in order to manualize it, and then subsequently found a neurological process that was working in the animal world called reconsolidation. And when we looked at what they were doing with the animals, it was very close to the protocol that we had developed from New York. So we went across all of that again and adapted it so that it produced a reconsolidation neurological reaction. And that's the difference between 50, 60% and 90% remission. So that the protocol is actually a neurological intervention where you're using the visualizations from the memory and altering them in a fashion that changes it neurologically and separates the remembrance, the memory of the traumatic event from its traumatic feelings. So to get all done, you know, I've done about 300 vets now, like 150 from the Vietnam era. And you can imagine well, you would know this well. I know both of you would. Who's been 40, 45 years having nightmares, sleeping 2 hours a night, etc. I do 2 2-hour sessions. The end of the 4th hour, I say, look, would you tell me about that horrible problem you had in Vietnam when your best friend died in your lap, etc. again? And the guy says, this is after the treatment. Yeah, well, you know, we were going up, we were on a patrol, and wait a minute. What have you done to me? I haven't been able to talk about this without getting upset for 45 years. And then he comes back the next week and he said, Doc, I don't know what you've done, but I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a time for 45 years. And I've been sleeping 8-10 hours every night since last week. What have you done to me? And then, of course, if you look at the scientific literature, the amazing thing to me is that even though they might have 10 traumas, if we fix 2 of them, the other 8 dissipate. And now the guys I did down at Marshall, I did them 8 years ago, and they're still clean. So that
Fantastic.
when I talk to someone like yourself, Dr. Rossman, or to Joe, who have seen PTSD in terms of how difficult it is to cure, to work with, and I show them these results, the first response is, you got to be fooling me. Do you have any bridges to sell? And that's been a large problem with the protocol, to be honest, is
Hard to
that
believe.
it looks too good to be true.
Hmm. Do you have any sense, without going too deep down the technical rabbit hole, do you have then a sense of what happens neurologically to that stored emotional reaction and energy? Do you have a
When
model for
you
that?
when you're walking through the world, and you've almost been eaten by a lion 2 years before, and you're walking through a grassy plain, and you see the grass moving 50 yards from you, your body goes, whoof. Your amygdala has been programmed from the last time you almost got eaten by a lion, and it's vigilant, it's hyper vigilant, looking for lion sign. As soon as it sees that grass moving, your body gets flooded. The amygdala goes, wake up and get in fight or flight mode, and you're defending yourself or running away.
Mm-hmm.
That installation of the fear event then has installed triggers. So, like your Vietnam guys, half of them can't go to a 4th of July celebration because the fireworks set them off. They know where the hell they are, but it just they can't stop the fear frightened response from the noise, etc. I can remember, one of the first guys I did, Christ, it's 14 years ago now. Lovely, lovely guy, a major, retired major from the Army, was walking with his wife and kids at a farmer's market in San Francisco. They were just going shopping, and they were walking up one side of the island. Coming up the other side was a Vietnamese family. Now, this is a guy who's, 5 years after Vietnam, he's home with his family, and he's working as an insurance salesman or something like that. The sight of that Vietnamese family in Vietnamese dress triggers him. Now he's with his wife and 2 kids. He runs between the stalls into the parking lot and all the way back to his car. Meanwhile, his wife and kids don't know what the heck has happened. They see him run away. They catch up to him back at the car, and he's sweating and like standing next to the car. And they say, what happened? What's happened? And he's embarrassed as hell, if you know what I mean, because he literally is unconscious from the time that that trigger grabs him, and he's back at the car. It's what brought him to me for treatment. He was so embarrassed by it being that strong, and then he had young kids, and he's embarrassed not to be in control like that. But it's a good description of what it's like for these guys to walk around with.
Yeah, if I can interject. Now, being the guy that's been in a combat environment a few times and so forth, I can firsthand tell you there, Dr. Bourke and Dr. Rossman, is that I remember working up training, because we train as we fight, right? We work up and train, and then we get tested on our standards in terms of getting ready to go into that environment. These are certain things that we have to check off if you're going to be a battalion landing team on a ship, or you're just going over as a battalion or within a group and so forth. So you need to hit these training requirements and make sure that you meet these requirements. That's actually designed for you to actually maneuver through a combat environment effectively and communicate and so forth. So that is, to me, my mind was focused on training the Marines, getting this training, moving as a unit, so forth, and then logistics and so forth. And so my mind wasn't on what was to come. Okay, it was on that training. But we dealt with service members at that time going through certain anxieties and awareness because their mind wasn't focused on that immediate training. Their mind was focused on what's going to happen next month when we deploy and so forth. So I've seen that and noticed that. Now, for me being in a combat environment when I'm first getting there, honestly, my situation awareness started slowly to enhance because my mind is saying to me, okay, I'm in this hostile environment. My mind is saying, okay, we need to win the heart and minds, but we still have objectives and missions. My mind is saying I got to keep my leadership above as an umbrella over all my staff non-commissioned officers and young service members, as well as be the advisor to the commanding officer. My mind is on what's the next step. My mind is on what happens if someone gets injured. I do a 9-line medevac them home. So my mind is at that level. So here I am as this leader in this environment, absorbing, all these what ifs that I have to be ready for. Right.
Yeah.
So slowly, I remember, landing, in Iraq and moving up, up to Baghdad and so forth. But at the time, we didn't have armored vehicles. Get realized. Now we had Humvees, but we just had the silicone plastic, whatever, lining up for the doors and so forth. So we were getting makeshift doors made by the locals in Iraq and so forth. Putting sandbags on the floors of the Humvees because it's aluminum vehicle, right? You want something absorbed because we know what's been happening. So that right there is triggering anxiety, knowing that we have to adjust who we are, our vehicles, our mounting of weapons, our positioning of service members as we move forward, let it be a leapfrog or whatever the case is. So that's already triggering anxiety. That's already triggering, holy smokes, what am I getting into? But my mind was capturing small glimpses of that anxiety, but my mind was more focused on the mission, on troop welfare and keeping my commanding officer, on the mission, let me worry about all this other stuff. So I absorbed a lot, right? But as I moved up and, convoy hits an IED, situation awareness surfaced a little bit more, right? Your hearing is enhanced, right? You're more focused on your peripheral vision of what you're looking for, right? Everything is enhanced. All your emotions are enhanced, but the mind has to click in and you take those emotions and you somewhat shift them to that back burner, but they're there and they're growing, right? But in order, exactly. And I know where you're going to go with this. So that to me is where it started with me. Yeah. As that Marine leader at the time. But my focus now, remember, when you're a senior enlisted advisor for commanding officer, you're looking at, you got to deal with a tactician of leadership. You got to deal with a tactician of the battlefield, So if I'm bringing that leadership to him, I have to make sure that his mind is focused on that. I got to make sure my leaders are focused on the mission, and then I got to look at where the weakness is in terms of their squads or platoons or company, in terms of who's having issues. So all that's playing a role in defining my experience in a combat environment as I'm starting off. What's your thought on that? Because there's more to it, right? First encounter in combat, being shot the first time, you shooting the first time, seeing the first wounded in action, first KIA, and it just builds upon it. So I give you that at first. So what's your thought on that there, Dr. Bourke?
Yeah, been a long time noodling with this, Joe, in the sense of you got 10 guys on the bridge. They're pinned down. 2 of them were killed. 8 of them survive. And 2 of them come out with PTSD. And 6 of them, they were in a firefight, to tell you all the details, etc. What the hell happened to those 2?
Right, exactly.
So after 15 years of my kind of work, the key to it is dissociation. So that you have, just like you said, Joe, I can feel the emotions, the negative emotions, fear, etc., coming up. But I got to be occupied with taking care of Joe, making sure that that keeps you from associating to those fear and flee elements that are coming. That you're a full intelligence. You know you're liable to get killed, and you should be getting the hell out of there, or dealing with that. But if it's really serious, and the more you look at it, you're going to die, is what it feels like.
Mhm.
And you're just flooded with fear, fear, fear. Everything else is gone except terror. That's associated to the traumatic feelings that go with a near-death experience. If you're mentally thinking, wait a second, I got to get those first three guys the other side of that thing, or they're going to get killed. I've got to maintain control here. Now you got a different part of your brain working, and you're not getting associated with that fight or flight that the situation is producing. But very few people, when it comes to the real thing, have control of that. So
Okay,
that
so I understand what you're saying in terms of that, but through my experience,
Yeah.
walking through that gauntlet of emotions, right, in that combat environment, pushing those emotions to the back burner because the focus needs to be on the mission, troop welfare, my commanding officer, and so forth. And we're always keeping busy. That's one thing we tell our Marines, that complacency kills, right? So after a conflict, we're cleaning weapons, we're ready for the next patrol, or gear inventory. Our mind is constantly on the mission, preparation, security, and so forth, because once we give them that downtime, all right, where they try to get some sleep, and the sleep is very restless because your emotions over control, right, your feelings.
and
So you're
emotions
hearing
are
everything.
pushing
So
to go
it's
back to that
right. So it's
event.
harder to get to sleep. You're sleeping less. You're feeling the anxiousness and so forth. You want to get up and clean your weapon. You want to go back on that patrol. You want to get back into the fight, because that complacency, that relaxation is bringing those emotions that you've been pushing through firefights and so forth. And nobody sees your emotions because you're just pushing them. You push them to the back burner, let's stay focused and move. And you're doing this for 9 months at a time. So you finally transition home, Dr. Bourke, right? And the military hasn't figured this out yet, and I'm hoping that they do, is that, we know we want to go home, we want to see our families and so forth. So what do? They give us some type of a questionnaire. Are you seeing SpongeBob, Bob and Patrick at 2 a.m. with showers, shooting a cigar, smoking? Stupid questions. Are you going to kill yourself? But of course we want to get home. We know if we flag ourselves through a questionnaire, we're going to be detained. Next, people are swarming on us, and we're going through this somewhat of protocol that they may have, and then we get flagged, and next, or, they take our weapon from us, and they push us to an administrative desk job or whatever the case is, because they're worried not only about that individual, but they're worried about the individuals around them. Then they're worried about suicide ideations. And I mean, and we know that as service members. So we kind of like bypass that questionnaire and so forth, because we know that the stigma of having, the fog of war or PTSD or whatever is going to play an effect on our tomorrow, on our future. So all that stays on that back burner, or if it does surface, we try to reason with it, control it, until it becomes a problem. Problem for that individual not showing up at work, problem for that individual drinking fluids or alcohol or drugs or whatever to suppress, or try to take that edge off of anxiety so they can sleep at night or whatever. Or the big one, if you're married and you have children, all that, they end up getting the carnage. So you deal with the carnage of war, you bring that carnage home, and they feel your emotions, so they're absorbing, the remnants of that carnage that you bring home. And that's my life story, and it goes on and so forth and so forth and so forth. But I believe that to be the standard for service members that serve time in combat, because we all absorb. I mean, yeah, okay. So we have post-traumatic stress and then a disorder which keeps on coming back. Could you break down post-traumatic stress and the disorder aspect of it? Because that's what you work on. Because PTSD is real in this world. You don't have to be in the military to absorb, you know, an environment that you're not accustomed to, right? Pretty much. So
And you got the fact. Let's say it to you this way: being in the military confounds, because of a number of the personal and vocational relationships that go on there, the problem. I was lucky that the first time I applied this was with regular citizens after 9/11. They were clean, and they needed to get back to work. The Aon Corporation lost all of their computers. They needed these 850 survivors to rebuild the business, so they were going to lose billions of dollars. So all of the people that I were treating had the information for the different insurance programs, et cetera, that they were covering that needed to be serviced. So they couldn't go to work. They would come to me, I would do the protocol, and 2 to 4 hours later, they would be back at their desk. I would get a call from an executive, like I remember one I did in early November. And she was an executive. She was under her desk and unable to come out. She was probably in a $1,500 suit. And that's in the reconstructed offices. Something had triggered her. She got under the desk and she was frozen, like she was above the 100th floor in 9/11. I took her out. I spent the afternoon doing the protocol, and she came back to work the next day and was on the, was in a highly functional position with Aon for the rest of that year. It was like a miracle, Joe.
well, let me
But
tell
you see, she didn't have to worry about saying I got a problem, that she wasn't
Right,
going to get
right.
promoted, or she was going to lose her job, or she wasn't going to get her pension, or what the hell ever. It was clean. Now, working with the veterans, you have to.
Well, there's two things. You have the veteran population where they left the no defect mentality, right? In the military, you have this no defect mentality. God forbid you have a blemish in character, whatever the case is, you get earmarked, you know, and I either push you out or move you. I mean, it's instant obedience to orders. It's a structure, you know, and there's nothing wrong with it, because you need that machine. Because when you're dealing with going to combat, you know, you can't deal with emotions. You have to be professional. You have to have muscle memory. All right. So emotions is not allowed, because emotions will get you killed, get others killed. So you learn to suppress it and push it back. You know, so that is the environment in the military. I know that for a fact. But the environment in the civilian world, when you deal with veterans that are more complacent now because the environment is a slower pace. They're dealing with all these emotions coming back up, right? All these, how I'm feeling and so forth and so forth. Why am I feeling anxiety?
Let me
Sleep
let me give you.
abnormality. I mean, all these are negative attributes that fall under the umbrella of PTSD, right?
Let me give you a wonderful example, Joe, that's only just come on the table. Now, the Ukrainian Ministry for Defense has just funded training all of the psychologists in their system, in the protocol, with no, they don't need to do any of the work that our Army has to do in terms of cutting out the crap around having this problem. You've got the flu, we got a treatment. You say you got the flu, come in, you get the treatment, and get the hell back and do your job.
Right.
And dealing with them has made clear to me the difference between what our Army should look like and what it does. In the sense that you're getting all that BS at an executive and an organizational level in our current Army, but the guys know they're a first lieutenant, second lieutenant, and they have this problem. There's very little chance they're going to retire as a lieutenant colonel.
Oh, definitely.
And the Ukrainian army has got that, and it's not set up that way, Joe. It's beautiful to hear it and watch it.
You know, well, they're I'm not going to say they have different standards. They do definitely have a different culture and mindset, and they're more inviting as a culture. I understand that because I've traveled the world, and quite frankly, sadly, I don't think America is an inviting country, sadly, compared to what I've witnessed being, let it be in Europe, Southwest Asia.
They're in the, yeah,
Exactly. So their culture is a little bit different than ours. We are polarized, as you see. I mean, the narrative right now. I mean, God forbid you're a black man running for president. God forbid you're a female running for president. God forbid you're this, because they're going to start tearing you down and peeling you back on your likes and dislikes and so forth if you want my vote. Are you kidding me? You know, what's the content of that? So I look at the content of that veteran. Now, so now that's the reason why I partnered with Dr. Marty Rossman, is because I went through that whole protocol through the VA and all that, and and I'm still dealing with my issues, and I know we had that conversation, Dr. Bourke, but I believe that understanding the power of the mind, understanding why do we hold on to things, understanding how can we weed that mental garden, how can I relax myself a little bit more, why did this one little thing today ruin all the goodness that the day has to offer, and my day just started and it's 8 o'clock in the morning? Are you kidding me? So now my whole day is ruined because I chose to absorb that negative aspect of my morning, and then my whole day shot. So I wanted something, and I believe that Dr. Marty Rossman's techniques on mind, body, and spirit definitely helps. I mean, it's not one shoe that fits all, but it's a tool. We have a toolbox that can assist. So I'm hoping that you and Dr. Marty Rossman here can talk a little bit more about mind, body, and spirit. And I know I know you have a full understanding of that. There's no doubt in my mind, but you work in that world, but we have some tools, and I was wondering, did you have an opportunity to review and look at some of these tools with Mission Possible? And do you think that your folks can utilize some of this? And definitely I want to utilize what RTM has to offer. We're going to talk a bit more about that, as we further along in this segment, whatever, but I wanted to get your opinion on Mission Possible and what we're trying to do.
Joe, that's a wonderful introduction. Let me explain. Everyone is looking for the silver bullet, and we do have a 90% cure, if you want to use that word,
right,
for PTSD. It goes away. But that is a tool for a therapist's toolbox. You have a whole set of life skills, social skills, vocational skills, emotional skills, etc., that make a full person. And I think the way that we're made, we have to learn how to be better people across the 60, 70, 80 years that are given to us. And if you get to 80 and you've done a good job learning, you've got wisdom, huh? But you don't have that at 22. And unless you keep learning, and that's what a good therapist is doing, is helping a person to manage themselves, to self-actualize. So that I've looked at your stuff, Dr. Rossman, and I love it in terms of it's like when we went out to Camp Pendleton, Joe, and I had and we went after the veterans group. We had the veterans Christians group led by a major, and they were dealing with their PTSD with Christianity. We had the motorcycle crew, and they were dealing with it with camaraderie, and we had the dog people, and all of them were adding social and life skills to help these vets with PTSD.
But they were using, and sorry to interrupt, they were using that carrot in front of the donkey kind of concept, right?
Depending on
more
what,
of small incentive, right? Because not everybody likes dogs, right? Not everybody is into Christianity, right? But if you can use a platform or an object or an animal that loves unconditionally, right? That can be an opening to the discussion.
I'll give you a quick example that makes it plain as hell. The guy who we treated, who was the head of the evangelical group, we had to get PTSD veterans to treat for the research, Dr. Rossman. And I went to these groups to get PTSD clients to do the research on. And the guy was a retired major. He said, I'm not going to ask my group to do it until I do it first. We did him. He got it. It cleaned him up. He was drinking. He was having real problems, but still running the evangelical group. When he got cured, his wife of 25 years and 3 kids says, oh, thank God you're better because you can take care of yourself now, and left him because she'd been living with this really screwed up person and all of the Army stuff for like 5 years.
Absolutely.
Now, he no longer had PTSD. We cured him of that. But boy, did he have a life pile of work to do coping with that divorce and separation from his children.
Because
we had a therapist working with us there in San Diego who helped him for 2 years. So I remember it well. And to me, Dr. Rossman, it makes this point if you hear what I'm saying. The protocol does something wonderful. It's a magnificent tool, but it goes into a therapist toolbox. There's another 200 things that might be needed if you're treating 100 people. We got to think of it that way.
Right. So you may have to combine your RTM with understanding mindfulness, body, and looking into the spirit, because you're not only treating the bad memory or the emotions or anxiety because of that incident, but you're also treating the remnants that that individual is actually producing that's affecting his livelihood, right? From his job.
Absolutely.
Right? People lose their job, they lose their families,
when you think of the example I gave you, Joe, about a wise person 80 years old.
Why does he have to be 80 years old to be wise?
Well, I'm thinking of having lived life and lots of experiences. If one of the things that they've picked up in their life travels is mindfulness or a good meditation, that's a tool. That's a really helpful device for most people. I teach 10 different kinds of meditation. And while you might not have PTSD, to have that as a skill, as a life skill, I just did a kid here locally who had the most abrasive set of social skills you could dream of. And nobody ever stopped the kid to play back to him the way he was treating other people. He was a Cornell genius, and he knew more than anybody, he was ever. And as soon as he met someone, he was out to show them how dumb they were and how smart he was. He didn't make a lot of friends. He's been divorced twice. And I just had to pull that out, show it to him in a way that he didn't get alienated from me. And we fixed it in 2 months. And he's a different person because he's not, well, that's a therapy skill, Joe. And RTM is a therapy skill. And like I said, there are 20 or 30 of them that I think are really helpful. If you meet a therapist at this, ordinarily, they only have 4 or 5 of this. No one's got all 20. I worked with Milton Erickson for a bit, Dr. Rossman. And Carl Rogers.
Right.
And those were friggin' therapeutic geniuses. And they brought skills to the table that are magnificent.
Right.
Uh,
And
setting ourselves up as therapists so that we're doing it this way. In other words, Joe, you're asking me, where does this RTM fit in a psychologist's toolbox?
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
that metaphor I'm sending back to you, that's exactly the right question, Joe. It's a tool that a good therapist should have when he hits PTSD, because it works better than almost anything else I've seen in the world.
It's fantastic. Let me step in here for a minute. Carl Rogers' approach is eminently teachable, I think, whereas Erickson's is not. And it was idiosyncratic. It was a work of genius. Many people have studied with him and studied his works and so on, and you can derive a lot of great skills from that. But your method seems to be, from what I can glean, very teachable, and something that can, based on the number of people that you're training now and the way that some assumptions I'm making and the way you've described it, it seems like it's very teachable. And in this, I'm thinking back to, God, it's 40 years ago. I think it was around the corner back in the 80s when I was doing psychotherapy. And there was no trauma therapy. There was no trauma therapy. Nobody knew anything about trauma. And it was just treated with ordinary psychotherapy, which was tremendously ineffective and re-traumatizing. And then all of a sudden started to come along a renewed interest in hypnosis, and then EMDR, and then some of these alphabet, I think of them as dissociative and reassociative therapies, which it sounds like you've winnowed out and put into a very usable form. And now it's one of the mainstays, really, of therapy. A therapist has to be trauma trained and trauma informed, and this sounds like a tremendous breakthrough. I was wondering, in the future, I know there's a lot of bureaucratic obstacles and a lot of psychological obstacles to this being adopted, but it almost seems to me like at some time in the future, this could be available so that not only combat veterans and first responders, but also rape victims and even car accident victims and so on, who often have prolonged chronic pain syndromes when
they're all traumatic memories. This is applicable to all of them. Yep.
Exactly. So this is about the most, and Joe and I have collaborated with some of the expertise that I've gained over 50 years, and Joe's perception of how useful these self-care tools can be. Like you said, these are tools we want to put in everybody's box for better self-care and self-management, but you're talking about a therapeutic tool to put into therapists' box. It's going to make them much more effective. So that's fantastic, I think.
Yeah. That's my real gift, Dr. Rossman. I taught program learning materials at Cornell, and breaking down the protocol to its effective elements, behaviorally defining them, and then putting them in a manualized training program for duplication. That's I've just founded a nonprofit, the Research and Recognition Project, and it's going on now to take that model, how we developed RTM, and do another 2 or 3 protocols as effective for different problems, by way of teaching that kind of therapeutic programming, so that when you and I went to school, most of what we got was tautological, was 4,000 names for everything, and no systematic treatments for them.
Nothing pinpointed.
Mm-hmm.
The actual, and I can remember Dr. Rogers saying that the love element, whatever you want to call it, high empathy, not to bother people, in a person was an energy, and it was recognized as by dogs, cats, and other people. And if a therapist did not have that energy, and he said it was 100 times harder to fake than to just have, that people knew when you cared about them, and they would let you in to help them change when they got that sense.
And that's what I wanted to say, because
That's the first thing
I've seen psychiatrists, I've seen doctors and so forth. To me, I have to have a relationship with someone. I mean, you got professionalism, personalism, whatever, but I have to have a relationship with someone if I'm going to talk something personal about me. Now, I couldn't care what people think about me, my experiences, what I say and so forth, because quite frankly, my day still moves forward with that negative or whatever the case is, because that's what our environment is. Everybody has an opinion, right? So anxiety is awful high right now, not just in active duty military or our veterans or whatever, but in society in general, children and so forth. So Dr. Bourke, does your organization provide treatment as well as education to teach the
Oh yeah, if you go on the website now, Joe, we've trained 350 therapists. We hope to get it up to 1,000 by the end of the year.
What does it
across
cost
the
to train
United
somebody?
States.
What does it cost to train somebody?
To train someone is $3,000 to $4,000
Just for one individual?
for one counselor to get trained.
Right.
Now, we've got the people that we've trained and certified, and understand, when we train them, Joe, they don't get certified to administer until they've treated 2 people successfully, and we've measured it over their shoulder.
Okay, so let me
No
ask you.
one is going through our training doesn't know how the hell to do it.
Okay, let me say that. I'm just going to throw this out, right? DVNF, and I got something for you later on we'll talk about, but DVNF wants to, and if Dr. Rossman is willing, DVNF would like for you or your organization to train Dr. Marty Rossman in this protocol. DVNF will take care of the cost of that. What's your thought on that, Dr. Marty Rossman?
I'd be very interested in it. So it's something that we should talk about where that's going to go. I guess the question.
If you're interested in it just for your work that you do, Marty, I'd be excited to support that.
That's fantastic. So
that's no. That the number I gave you is.
I might not be eligible.
No. For training, you're certainly eligible, Dr. Rossman. But for what I was talking about was people getting treated, Joe.
Oh,
right.
So you can go online and you find therapists. To get trained now is going to take a year or year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do this, the whole thing is set up like programmed learning materials. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to go through the protocol, then you'd have to work as a coach, then you would have to teach a part of it, then you would have to teach the whole thing under supervision, so that to get certified as a trainer is a whole track. This is exactly what I knew Shapiro, who did EMDR, mm-hmm. which had some validity, and she did none of this.
Yeah.
So what's the cost what's the cost? About
Joe, let me interrupt for a minute, because we have a question from one of our participants, Tom. And the question is something I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in, is if somebody wanted to access this to get treated themselves, Dr. Bourke, how would they go about finding a treating therapist?
If they have a pencil out, they go onto our website, the research and recognition project.org.
Okay. Jessica, could you put that in the chat room, maybe?
The research and recognition project.org. You go onto the website and then you look for a therapist. And when you put in your zip code, and then you'll find a therapist near you, although 90% of the people are being treated online now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's working.
Great.
It's funny, Dr. Rossman. I'm aged.
Right,
And
me too.
I fought with our team tooth and nail that this had to be done live.
Yeah,
You're vintage, Dr.
and
Bourke.
it
You got it.
doesn't,
I'm vintage, all right. And
and it works online.
they
Works
they ran
telehealth.
2 pilots. They measured it and they shoved it up my nose. It works. It
It's
works
good.
online. I had to
Well,
admit
that
it.
makes it so much more accessible. That's
You
really a
got it.
good thing.
And we
That's
got 350 on the website at the moment, and we hope to get 1,000 by the end of the year.
Okay,
that's fantastic.
so how much
Absolutely.
now you're non it's a nonprofit. Is this paid for or
The way that's set up,
do you offset their cost?
the way it's set up for treatment, Joe, is those therapists have gone through the training and gotten certified, and they're out on their own. But we've certified them in the protocol. So all we're doing is serving as a junction to tell the PTSD clients where they
The
can find a
RTM is.
therapist. They sign up with a therapist. The therapist does a clinical interview, does normal therapy, and they pay them in the normal fashion for going for therapy.
Okay.
We don't have anything to do with it at this point. We are establishing now an outpatient treatment program in which we'll have all of that in-house online, but we don't have that constructed yet. In the interim, I was getting, Joe, you can imagine, given this thing was getting recognized, I was getting calls 2 or 3 times a week from people with suicidal husbands and daughters and sons, and not having a way to help them to get to the protocol. So this, what we have now is an interim solution that gets it to clients who need it, and we'll be building on that. I figure we need something in the neighborhood of 50 or 60,000 clinicians, in the next 2 or 3 years, with COVID and the strain that's out there, the number of untreated PTSD clients across the system. Joe, I don't know if you ever saw the female study that we did at Camp Pendleton.
No.
36 women, more than half of whom had MST, most of them rapes. 96% complete remission of all symptoms in the study. It's on the
remarkable.
website.
That's remarkable.
And that's, you know what rape, how hard that is, Dr. Rossman, to get at.
Yeah.
I did not expect that, to be honest.
That's fantastic.
96% were remitted of PTSD in that.
All right, so we have like 7 minutes left. However, I want to stretch it another 7 minutes, so 14 minutes, if that's okay with both of you. The reason why, I know it's kind of short or whatever, well, maybe 5. I'm seeing Dr. Rossman cringe just a little bit. The reason why
I have another obligation, Joe. Sorry.
Okay, so we'll stretch it to 7.5 minutes. How's that? Inch 30 seconds. But so if we don't know what the cost of a veteran, because not every veteran has through the VA, not every veteran has a percentage, so treatment is not being paid for. What would it cost for a veteran to go through RTM?
Most of the therapists who are out there working now charge between $85 and $150 an hour.
How many hours are we looking at?
And the generalization, they get the protocol in like 5 or 6 hours tops, but they're getting, you want to make it something between 5 and 10 hours at whatever the therapist rate is.
Right.
You know what the cost for therapy for someone in the VA is? How much it costs the VA to treat a client? $80,000 a year.
How much?
$80,000 a year for PTSD treatment per year. You know what the average length of stay is, Joe? 15 years.
Wow.
And here's a cure. Here's a cure for $1,500.
Fantastic.
So
it's a real. It gives the person back their life. This is not a money-making proposition.
That's fantastic. What's the lowest level that you train? Do you train MFTs? Do you train social workers? Do you?
Legally, they have to have a mental health license in a state.
Okay.
We certainly could train, you know, high school graduates with common sense, etc. The protocol is that simple to administer.
Yeah.
But you have all the other stuff around that legally.
Right.
We don't dare
They have
train
to
anyone
practice.
without a mental health state license.
So what would it,
Yeah.
so let me just, and I know I'm interrupting a lot here, I'm trying to get it in, but what would it cost for one therapist? 10,000 for the, you know, what is the whole, so if you're gonna get a new therapist that wants to learn this protocol, what would it cost for this therapist to go through? Roughly.
I haven't put it together. Roughly, I'd say something in the order of 7,000 or 8,000.
Okay. So DVNF wants to sponsor $10,000 for a social worker, not a social worker, but someone that wants to utilize these tools, RTM, in their field. So that's something that you and I can work on after this episode or whatever. But I want to pledge from DVNF $10,000, and we want to sponsor that individual and learn a little bit more about that individual and how that individual is going to utilize the RTM and the protocol and so forth in their field. And I don't care what state it's in. I want it to be in the United States, but yes, I want to learn more about it.
I can't say yes to that.
No?
But I want you to come with it. We have a marvelous team now, Joe. It's no longer Uncle Frank running this thing.
All right, Frank.
We got a group of real pros. Mark Ackerman is our CEO. The last nonprofit he managed was $150 million a year. I'm a good research scientist and a clinician.
Right.
I'm not a businessman organization.
Link me up with your CEO.
Well, I was just going to say, let's make that happen.
Link me up with CEO, and we'll talk and we'll fabricate a relationship, because I definitely know that your passion. I mean, you can just tell that this RTM is a wonderful tool, and I just know that your passion, because we spoke in the past and so forth. So I'm excited to bring this relationship together, and I wanted Dr. Rossman to meet you as well, Frank, because I hold you dear to me.
I saw your work, Dr. Rossman, so it's not like I just met you sitting here looking at your face. I'm really appreciative of what you've done and what you do.
Well, likewise. And I was going to say before we go that maybe there would be, if you would ever have some time for a little bit more extended discussion, I would love to have a discussion. Somebody asked one of our participants, you know, are there specific tools you can think of from the Mission Possible program that pair well with what Dr. Bourke teaches about RTM? You know, I would love to have that conversation, and just to see if there may even be things, and I don't know. I wonder if there are things that can improve the efficacy of our program that we can learn from yours, or
Absolutely.
I doubt it would be vice versa, but I'd love to have. I have a feeling we have a lot of people in common in our training and interests, and would love to have a discussion with you at some point if you'd be up for it.
Absolutely. That, you know, to me, how shall I say? This is who I am, not what I do.
Right. This is why you're here.
You know the answer before you ask the question, Marty.
Well, this is your purpose. Well, this has been your life's purpose, Frank.
That's right.
You know, your passion is there. I love the passion. It's contagious, you know, and I always enjoyed our conversations.
Well, Joe, I now one thing I haven't done before we get off the air here, I promised myself, Joe stopped and got us money about what, 6 years ago?
2 years ago, yeah.
At a time when we were crawling on hands and knees and living on economic fumes, and he got us a grant from his foundation. We will never forget that. And I need to say formally to the organization, Joe, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Frank, I am thankful to be in your circle and to be in Dr. Rossman's circle. To be in your circle, Frank, because I know that you and Montel and others have somewhat of a think tank, you know, and you welcome me to that. And I'm not sure what I bring, but I run my jibs and you guys listen or whatever. But
hey, we all know Master Sergeants won the wars, Joe, not the generals. Keep going.
But, you know, I'm thankful for your friendship. I'm thankful for your passion, and I know it's much needed out there. And I'm always going to be right behind you, right alongside you. And if I can add anything to you, your organization, I'll give you 100% of me, and I promise you that. You know, and same thing with Dr. Rossman. I mean, he will give you 100% of himself. And for you two to link up and communicate, that means the world to me, because I know that Mission Possible is going to be better off. I know that Dr. Frank
Right.
Bourke is going to be better off, because we are bringing we are aligning our communities together pretty much.
Dr. Rossman, I'm still pretty much grounded with this shoulder replacement next week. Joe's got
Is
my,
that
I'm at home, so that email me with some times that you have available next, and we'll just do it next week.
Yeah,
that'd be
I'll,
great, Frank.
yeah,
Thank you so much,
yeah.
You got it.
both of you. I'm very appreciative to Sergeant Major Joseph VanFonda for pulling this DVNF together. He's helped so many people, not only 27 years combat experience in the Marines, but following that with a career continuing to help veterans and first responders and help seed people and support people. He's been a great partner for me. I just couldn't, and bringing me together with people like you, it's a wonderful thing. I'm very grateful, Joe. Very grateful to meet you, Frank, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Well, as usual, my co-host, Dr. Rossman, and my wonderful friend, Dr. Frank Bourke. I enjoy you both. I really do. I enjoy your intellect, your conversation, your easygoing approach. I'm the 90 miles per hour kind of guy, and Dr. Rossman's more the 25, so it tries to slow me down a little bit. But I believe that all life challenges can be managed. I believe that Mission Possible provides tools that can help equip individuals to work through their daily, their weekly, or their monthly challenges by understanding who they are, you know, understanding why they hold on to things and so forth. And I definitely believe in RTM and Dr. Bourke and what he brings to the table, his life's passion. You know, the proof is out there. I'm going to talk to your CEO. Please link us up. And I'm going to provide support to your organization through DVNF, because we believe in what you're doing. And by behalf of our board of directors and my staff, Dr. Bourke, thank you, as well as Dr. Rossman. www.dvnf.org, Mission Possible. It's free. It's always going to be free. It's going to be free for all the service members that fought for our country to be free. And you'll be hearing from Dr. Bourke a little bit more in association with DVNF. And I'm hoping everybody has a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Joe.
Good
Thank you,
meeting you,
Frank.
Dr. Rossman.
All right, motivators.